Time Foundation. I bet you thought I was gone. Hadn't seen me for a while. But I'm not. I'm not. I've been in the lab. That's what I've been doing. Since the last master class, I've been in the lab. I spent 5 months writing 10 books. I'll say that again. I spent 5 months writing 10 books. So I didn't really have time to do a lot of interviews and recordings and YouTube and things like that. However, we're back, and we're back with a bang. And I don't mean just a regular bang. I'm talking about a nuclear type bang. Today we have the options monster, Pete Najarian. Pete Najarian is a super rich guy. He's modest. He'll never tell you that himself, but he is. You can see him on CNBC regularly. This guy is awesome. We are so honored to have him as our guest this morning. Good morning, Mr. Najarian.
Good morning, man. And you know I'm not Mr. Najarian. I'm just Pete. But I appreciate it. That's one of the nicest introductions I've ever had. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. But it's all true. It's all true. Reason why we had Pete on today, other than it's just cool to get somebody like him on. And you guys know my general concepts is I want influential people around you so that you can just maybe just get a little bit of gist of how they think and how they move, because it all matters. Like John O'Brien said, if you hang around 9 broke people, you'll be the 10th. That's something I can assure you. Pete, do you want to just give us just a brief general bio of your background?
Sure. Well, you and I know each other from going way back a few years. But, you know, I born and raised out in California and moved to Minnesota. And when we moved to Minnesota, we were in the midst of the 70s, the 1970s. And, you know, there was busing and all that kind of thing. And we were public school family. And so Central High School, Bryant Junior High was where I went. And I got educated right there in the city itself and loved it, loved Bryant, loved Central, got a chance to meet wonderful people like yourself and so many others. You know, it's funny, over the years, when I look back and even when I look at like social media, like a Facebook page or something like that, generally the friends that I have are the people that I know are genuine friends. And it's people like Central High people and people that I've known forever. And you know as well as it was a very mixed group of just about every ethnicity anybody could ever imagine. And probably we were the most lucky people in the world to have Dr. Jackson as our principal and Mr. Robinson as our athletic director and football coach, and Mr. Carter and all those people that were so influential on so many people about not just the sports side of it or not just the music side of it, because you and I both know we had a lot of musical sensations and unbelievable folks coming out of Central. Obviously the biggest being Prince, but there was a lot more than just Prince. And, you know, I love the fact that Central always emphasized the academic side of life too. And we, you know, I don't think people would ever have realized how many people from this small inner city school went off to places like Harvard and Yale and Stanford and, you know, you name the universities. Not that that makes it any different, but that was the education level that we were provided. And, you know, I don't know how many schools had the foreign language department that we had either, Jay. So we had the usuals, you know, French and Spanish and German, but we had Swahili, we had Chinese, we had, you know, we had a little bit of everything. So it really was the greatest experience. It really shaped me for who I was and where I was going. Then I went to the University of Minnesota. I was lucky enough to be recruited around the country for football. And I had committed to California, Berkeley, where my father had played, all his family had played. My brother Paul had committed and was playing there at the time. And last minute, my dad asked me to stay at home and go to school at the University of Minnesota. And he'd never, ever gotten involved. He loved that I was going to be going to Cal, And last minute he said, look, it's hard for me to see you play football. I'd like to see you as many games as possible. I'd love to see you here. And so I ended up saying, you know what, I can do that. So I changed, went to the University of Minnesota, got a degree there in physiology, and was lucky enough to be a academic All Big Ten and All American, and played football, played linebacker, had a great experience with one of the greatest coaches ever, Lou Holtz, who I loved to death. The guy transformed a lot of lives. You know, he really was a guy who actually lived by the idea that he wanted to know who we were as people and what direction we were going, and football was secondary. And nobody would believe me to say that, but it was true. And I know it for a fact because I know he had players that asked to be introduced to different parts of life outside of football, and Lou actually always did it. So I always tip my hat to him. He took off to Notre Dame. I was frustrated because he could have turned Minnesota into the power of the Big Ten, but had great success down at Notre Dame. And then I was lucky enough to play in the NFL for a while and kicked around from 1986 to 92 in the NFL. I played a game or two up in the CFL. I also played in the World Football League. And then I had to get a real job. And so I went to the Chicago Board of Options Exchange when my football career was over. And talk about the most confusing thing in the world, James. I'll tell you what, you walk on a trading floor and you see people jumping up and down and screaming and yelling. And the best example is Trading Places with Eddie Murphy. People should always watch something like that and see what it's, I mean, it actually shows you a little bit of the trading floor, how crazy things can be. But I navigated my way through that. My brother and I eventually sold the business, moved off the floor. Everything was turning digital like we are today, doing a Zoom. And it's amazing. We created a platform for trading, and another educational platform as well that we ended up selling to E-Trade. And now it's part of Morgan Stanley. And now we're doing it all over again. A company called Market Rebellion. It says, you know, it's funny. We looked at ourselves. We were trying to figure out a new name. We were Option Monster because we were two former linebackers, you know, together creating this company. And we decided on Market Rebellion because we looked at it and we said, you know, we're kind of rebellious guys. We don't talk about the markets like everybody else. We don't look like everybody else. I mean, how many financial guys look like I look? Probably not too many. So we figured we were kind of the rebels of the world. So that's why we're the Market Rebels, and Market Rebellion is our company. And that's where I am today. And it was great to see you not too long ago. We got a chance to see, because a long over-deserved, I mean, Mr. Robinson had an unbelievable career at Central High School. Not only as an athlete, but then as a you know, a mentor, a teacher, and all the things that he did, and a coach and everything. And a couple of weeks ago, they put him into the Hall of Fame, and it was way overdue, but it was something I think he cherished, and we all were there to support him, and it was great. It was great seeing you.
Wow, Pete, you're absolutely right, man. Coach Robinson, for those that don't know, was just recently inducted into the Minnesota Football Coaches Hall of Fame. And I know it's a big deal to him. And like Pete said, it's way overdue, but a lot of us ex-players showed up too. And I mean, we kind of felt almost like he took us along with him, you know. And the things that you were saying about Coach Lou Holtz, I've always felt that type of stuff about Coach Robinson, because building men was more significant to him than winning games. And I mean, the games take care of themselves, you know, because we won our unfair share. But his main focus was on building men. And if you think about it, really, I mean, you talked about all the programs at Central and all the scholars that were produced from Central, but just maneuvering around the Twin Cities, just what I see on a weekly basis is I see a lot of good fathers and a lot of good husbands that came through Coach Robinson's program. Yeah. And I just refuse to believe that that's coincidental. Would you agree, Pete?
I would 100% agree. I think that the challenges that we all face, and we know they're there, they become a little bit easier because of the upbringing that we got, not just from our home lives, but at school. And it was influential from Coach Robinson to Coach Carter. You know, there's so many. It's a long list of great people there at every point at Central. And that's what I think I would marvel at most. I don't think most schools have a principal that cared as much as Dr. Jackson, and you know, all these other people that we've mentioned, that they really cared. I mean, they wanted us to become good people, you know, people that could be something different maybe than, you know, the people that were struggling. Maybe they could be a little bit better than that. Maybe they could move on a little bit further and live a little bit better life if they, you know, paid attention. And they paid attention to the people, to the students, and what the needs were. And, you know, it's some of the wonderful gestures that people never know about that come from, you know, our mentors and our teachers. And, you know, that it's just extraordinary. I wouldn't change my experience being in the inner city at Central High School for anything.
I totally believe it. I wouldn't either. I did end up going to a private college, and the academics there, they were at Drake University. They were, you know, pretty high level, but I felt prepared. Coming out of Central, I felt prepared.
Yeah.
Hey, Pete, let's divert a little bit to maybe a little bit of business talk, and then we'll come back to the warm and fuzzies and so forth. But just business-wise, tell us a little bit about what you do, and if it seems a little complicated or whatever, that's okay, because we like for our young people to reach. You know what I'm saying? I would rather talk up. You know, I don't want to talk down to them. You know what I mean? So just a little bit about your general philosophy with options and everything. And let me give you a little bit of my background on that. Is that I cut my teeth as a financial consultant with Merrill Lynch. And, you know, I mean, you know the atmosphere over there, Pete. I mean, they pretty much just kind of tell us, oh, stay away from options. Oh, my God, you know, that's the fastest way to go bankrupt, blah, 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 blah. And I mean, I bought into that for a long time. Yeah. And then later on, I started just doing some research on my own, and I was studying guys like Mark Cuban and people like that actually use them regularly as like hedges. And I was like, oh, man, wow. But anyway, if you would, just
sure.
You know.
I would say this as well, and most people don't realize this. They know names like Mark Cuban, and I'll give you a couple others that are very involved in the derivatives or options market, as we call it. Warren Buffett. Everybody looks at this old guy, right? This old man. Is he really involved in the options world? And the answer is 100% yes. As a matter of fact.
Very much so.
Yeah, it's guys like him and Carl Icahn. And if people don't know those names, maybe take a look at some of these names: Carl Icahn and Warren Buffett. Mark Cuban, people know him as the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, but he's much more than that. And he made his
money. No, we talk about those guys all the time, so they know the names.
Yeah, okay. And I think that people probably are surprised. Even people, believe it or not, I'm on CNBC. I do the halftime report. I do the Fast Money show during the week, and you know, sporadically during the week they kind of separate it around. But I will tell you, I'm still trying to educate the folks at CNBC about the fact that these guys do what they do. And I'll give you a great example. James, I know you know this, but I will say this: when huge money, these big whales come in, as they call them, come in and start positioning in a stock, they oftentimes are obviously acquiring stock. But the other side of it that people don't realize is, and they have to, at some point, when you get to a certain percentage, they have to tell people that they are involved in this stock. Well, there's a secret little way they can kind of get around that, and that's in the options world. So it's amazing how often they can build huge positions by buying options and positioning into a stock along with buying stock, but only the bought stock is the percentage of the company that people care about. And so they are able to position in much faster than people think. And before you know it, they have a huge position involved in a stock that they assume is going to go much higher. So there are a lot of different ways that that people can navigate. You brought up hedging. That's another thing that we do all the time with the use of options, where we are able to hedge something either by, and I don't want to get too complicated. I'm not going to try.
Don't worry about it, Pete. Don't worry about it.
But the call and put options that is part of what I do each and every day. I've been doing it since 19.
Yeah, we've gone over all the basics.
Oh, good. Oh,
yeah.
Wow. I love
Spreads,
that.
calls, puts,
all
the basics.
Since 1992, I've been doing it. I started on the trading floors doing that. We moved off those trading floors. We've been doing it ever since with our own algorithms upstairs. I can be anywhere in the country just like anybody else with my computer, and I have the access to be able to trade. So if you buy puts to protect against a stock that's made a significant run to the upside, that gives you that protection. And what I always try to tell people, James, is you want to lose money on that. And they look at me and they say, what are you talking about? I said, it's just like buying insurance on your house or your car. You buy
Absolutely. They said it. Buffett does that all the time.
You don't want to.
He does that all the time. It's like, I don't need all the money.
Right.
You know, I'm happy if I had a nice profit. If it moved up well, I don't need all of it. You know,
you don't need all of it. And you
want
to protect it, right? You don't want a hurricane to come in and take down your house. Believe me, that you don't want that to happen. But if you have insurance, I used to always say to people, so you buy insurance on your car, it's worth about $20,000, $50,000, whatever it might be. You buy insurance on your house, a couple $100,000. If you've got significant money or any money in the stock market, it seems to me you'd want to buy insurance on that, right? I mean, it kind of makes sense. So, but people don't do that. And a lot of the time it's just because they don't have the knowledge to do that, or they don't have a broker at Merrill or anywhere else who understands it well enough to allow them to do that. Because quite frankly, a lot of brokerage companies, whether it's Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs, or, you know, you can go through the whole list, JP Morgan, anybody, they oftentimes don't have the knowledge either in the options world. They were taught it early on because they had to get all the testing, but a lot of the time they don't understand it well enough. They're not comfortable with it, so they don't usually bring it up. And you have to go through some paperwork to do that with the clients and all that type of thing. So that's sort of the world where I work. I work in that world with the options. As a matter of fact, the older I get, I have a little bit more positions in stocks themselves, but I still have a long list of options that I am trading day in and day out, literally. So people can call me short term if they want to, but I also have some stocks. I have stocks. My wife, I give her all the credit in the world. I always will. In 1994, I think it was, she looked at me and she said, you know I don't know much about the stock market, but she says, I like looking at certain companies. And she said, I think Apple's going to be big. Now, everybody can say that now, but she said it in 1994 when Apple, nobody even cared about Apple. There was an afterthought. They were talking about Microsoft and all these other companies. And she doesn't pretend to be brilliant, but she was just
Peter Lynch, buy what you know.
Right, buy what you know. You're so right. And I've always used the expression boots on the ground as well. I go during the pandemic is a great example of the boots on the ground, because you're going through the pandemic. We all were, going out to certain places or having it delivered from Target, from Walmart, from all these different places where we are. And I was going out and about and a little bit more active than most probably, but wasn't getting on planes and all that type of thing, of course, but just driving around the Twin Cities. And it was amazing to me. I was looking in parking lots and you could see it. And then suddenly I was looking at a boat one day and I was thinking about buying a boat. And I asked the gentleman about it. And this long story, very short, the gentleman said, well, Pete, we used to average about $2 million a week in boat sales, in normal times. I said, how's it going now? Are you in trouble? You got to file bankruptcy. He said, no. I'm selling about 5 million. and I looked at him and I said, so the boating business is pretty good. He said, yeah, you socially distanced, you probably don't have to wear mat, all that type of thing that goes along with boats. And I don't think a lot of people caught on to that very rapidly, right? So that was a great thing to know, because company right here in Minnesota, Polaris, a couple of years ago, bought a big pontoon company and was part of their, as well as all the ATVs and everything that Polaris has. Well, lo and behold, you look around from the boots on the ground and finding out that type of information, you look around and all of a sudden Polaris has a really big run to the upside for stock. So like you said, buy what you know, or what you're learning and finding out more about what you know. You know, and Target, you could say the same thing. You take a look at any stock chart of Target over the last year and a half, or even further, but specifically the last year and a half or so. So, you know, at some point in time that starts to slow down. We're kind of coming out of this pandemic, although these you know, the variants are there. But you know, no, like you said, trade what you know. If you want to be involved in a stock, if you know, if you feel comfortable about what you see and it seems to make sense, and then you just need to know a little bit more on how to dig into the fundamental story. But it's what you and I have done. It's what I've done for a really long time. You know, I watched kids go crazy over Lululemon. Now, I don't understand how a 15-year-old can afford Lululemon, but the good news was I didn't worry about why they were able to afford it. I was more looking at they're buying it. And so were adults. And so were more men. You started off all women. Then it turned into men. Then it turned into younger people, you know, teenagers. You know, you again, buy what you know, boots on the ground. But when you start seeing everybody, you know, in Lululemon and more casual wear, especially even at the workplace, boy, you know, you just start to look around and try to find out what those ideas are. And they're always changing. It doesn't last forever. We all know that. It's always changing and transitioning to somebody else. So, you know, I've always preached discipline, James, just like, you know, I mean, in life, whatever it might be, we all have to have our discipline and be able to say, you know what, at this point, I have to admit I'm wrong. Or at this point, I have to look at it and say, I need to take some profit. And that's the hardest thing, I think, for anybody. But that's also something that was ingrained in me from Coach Robinson, Coach Holtz, Bud Grant, who wasn't the head coach when I was playing with the Vikings, but he was always around. And, you know, you could just see the discipline that these guys all were trying to preach to us. And I use that discipline in the market.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, the thing about discipline is that, and I actually posted something on this the other day, is that really just separates somebody actually talking about something versus someone actually doing something. And I'm going to tell a little Pete Najarian story. He has no idea I'm going to say this. And I don't even know if he remembers this. But we all went to Central together, and we all played on the same football team. Me and my brothers, there's three of us, Larry, me, James, and Willie. And then four of those guys, John, David, Paul, and Peter, all of us played football at Central right around at the same time. And it was, I'll tell you, it was great times, great memories, great memories. And these guys, I saw pretty much all of them come through early, like Pete's a couple years behind me. Paul's, you know, basically my age. David's 1 year older than me, and John's same age as my brother Larry. So I didn't really see John come through, but I saw the rest of them, and they all came through skinny guys. When they first got to Central, every last one of them all came through skinny guys when they got to Central. And literally, you could see the transformation. When they left, they were all cut up and buff, every last one of them. Look, they all look like Greek gods when they left, but they all look like, you know, marathon runners, basically, when they got there. My point is that when we were at Central there, we could see this on a daily and weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. We could see that these guys didn't just snap their finger and boom, now they're, you know, Hercules or something like that. We saw the work in, we saw the work ethic. And we know you come from a tremendous family, Dr. Najarian, your dad. I mean, oh my God, we all loved him.
Yeah,
We all do. Still do. Great, great man, great family. But these guys didn't take any shortcuts. All the stuff we had to do, they did. They didn't take any shortcuts at all. You want to speak on that, Pete?
Yeah, my dad was one of the greatest, my mother and dad. Sometimes I feel bad because I always say dad first, and we pass by mom, and she deserves all the credit in the world because she's dealing with 5 characters that are just crazy, right?
That's true. My bad for not mentioning her. Such a wonderful lady. Such a wonderful lady.
One of the greatest ladies ever, and I'll tell you, she loved every one of the guys at Central. She really did, and she felt like
man, and she treated us so well.
She was like an extra mom.
Those football parties at your house, they were great. I mean, parties sound like it's wild, but no, they weren't wild. They were very G-rated, but they're so much fun.
Yeah, she's a wonderful lady. Grew up on a farm in Minnesota. She became a nurse. She met my dad in San Francisco when he was just an intern, so she was his boss for a while. It didn't last too long, although we always say his boss, but I'll tell you, he was a very powerful man himself. But he grew up in Oakland, California. And anybody who knows Oakland, Oakland's been Oakland since forever. And he went to Oakland High School, then went to Berkeley, and which was just up the street, a couple miles from Oakland High School. And Dad grew up. He lost his father, which is what sort of pushed him into wanting to become a doctor, so that people wouldn't pass away from what he thought was sort of insignificant for the wrong reasons, at least. His father died of the flu. And he thought, wow, that's kind of crazy. And that sort of prompted him into the world of medicine and got him to being a transplant surgeon later in life. And he did that for the rest of his life. And he transformed into, nobody wanted to do children. And my father said, well, why wouldn't we do children? Why wouldn't children be just as needing of a kidney as anybody else? It might be harder, but let's do it. And so he was the guy on the front lines for that whole thing. And actually, at the end of his last 15 years or so of his career in transplantation, he was mostly doing pediatric transplantation. So just a wonderful guy. But like you were saying, it's funny. I smile and laugh because no shortcuts. Here's a guy who Armenian heritage is our background, from Armenia. And when they moved to the United States, my dad's parents said, all right, we all going to speak English. We need to learn how to speak English. We are going to become Americans. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. I miss the fact that they didn't speak Armenian because I never learned it. But they wanted to really push themselves and get themselves to the next level. And dad, goes to Cal Berkeley. I'll give you a real quick fun story. My dad's very favorite professor at California Berkeley is a gentleman who was his mentor, who was unbelievable. And dad graduated college in 2 years, went to medical school, played in the Rose Bowl what would have been his senior year, but he was already in medical school. And the doctor that he became very friendly with, who became his mentor, as I say, he actually discovered the last 5 or 6 elements of the periodic table. So when people say people at Berkeley are pretty smart, they're pretty smart. And my dad was the first recipient of the award named after that gentleman at Cal Berkeley many years later. But just an incredible story. So when you look at the periodic table, you'll see Berkelium, Californium, and all these other names at the very end of the periodic table. That was my father's professor. And I actually always said, Dad, I think you even went on top of him as far as all the things you did and how you changed things. And just, that's who Dad was. So there was no shortcuts. You had to learn everything in detail and be prepared and always, and this stuck with me more than anything. At the end of every day, you can look in the mirror. Now you can lie to your mom, you can lie to your dad, you can lie to your brothers, you can lie to your friends. But when you look in the mirror, you can't lie to yourself. You can stand there and you say, did I get out of this day what I wanted? And my dad said that to me literally countless times. And after a while, he didn't have to say it anymore. I just lived that life. I still get up every single morning now, 5 a.m. to go work out. I still, so I've just stuck with some of these things that he kind of ingrained in me as far as the disciplines that I needed to have for me to be more successful and outwork people. That's always been, one of Dad's deals for all of us as well was, they might be smarter, they might be this, but you can outwork them. So that's what I try to do each and every day. And, I sit there oftentimes in the markets looking at things and doing this and doing that. And, it's a never ending thing either. You're always educating. You're always learning more. And if you push yourself, you can learn just a little bit more. It doesn't mean you're always going to be right. There's no absolutes a lot of the time, especially in the stock market. But boy, if you're prepared, you have a much better chance for success. And that's how I approach each day.
Well said. Very well said. Very well said. And for us coming up with you guys, the fact that you are very successful, is no surprise at all. So tell me this, Pete. Young guys that are coming up in Minneapolis or just really anywhere in the country, and they have ambitions. Maybe they want to be the next Pete Najarian. Is that possible?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was a decent student, but not a great student. But I think that the effort you put in, you do get out, right? And I think that, people can always use, the biggest frustration I ever have in my own children, and I've, raised them hopefully right, and I pushed them too, but there's no excuses. I always used to tell both my children, all through school, all the way from elementary school through college. They're both university graduates now, one from Nebraska, one from St. John's. And I've always told them, I said, look, I don't care if you fail at something, and I don't care if you get a C or a D grade in something. If you gave everything you had, and you can look in the mirror and tell me and tell yourself that you did what you needed to do to be prepared, and it doesn't click or whatever the case, then I'm okay with it. And I always told them, I said, look, it is not, everything's not always going to be easy. And there are going to be difficult times. And there are some things that you just won't get. That's okay. But did you really work hard to try to figure it out? And it sounds cliche and all the rest of it, but the reality is, I think if you hold yourself accountable, you know the answer. You know, and I used to tell people, I say, you know that you went out on I mean, I remember at the University of Minnesota, I took off on a couple guys when I was playing football, and I was I was the captain. But I'd see guys out drinking and having a great time on a Thursday night. We got a Saturday game. That tells me we're not prepared for Saturday's game. And so if they drop a pass, I wouldn't say anything if they played a great game and they were doing that on Thursday night. You know what? I got nothing to say. But if they do have a stumbling block, that affects me too. And it affects you and everybody else on the team, because these guys were selfish and decided they wanted to go out and have a great time. And now they missed tackles, or they missed balls, or they threw the ball incorrectly. All of that kind of stuff. I always just think, you know what? If you're prepared and you did everything you can, that's okay. It's okay if you throw the pass over the guy's head, but not if you were overserved on a Thursday night. We're playing on Saturday, and all of a sudden you fumble the ball or whatever. I'm going to come at you. And I did it many times because I wanted to win. I wanted to win in the classroom. I wanted to win on the football field. We all want to win in life. So all of that kind of comes together.
You're absolutely 100% correct. And I love it that our young people are hearing it from you. I mean, all the same things you're saying, I tell them all the time. All the time. But when it's coming from a multi-millionaire, they're probably listening just a little bit harder. It's like, wow, Pete's telling us basically the same things that James has been telling us. And I tell the story about bringing home my 6th grade report card. And so on my report card, I had 5 A's and a B plus, and the B plus was in English. And so I just thought, I thought my parents were going to be just thrilled, right? And so first thing my mom says is, "What happened in English?" I was, "Mom, I got 5 A's. Why are we talking about the one I got a B plus in it?" She said, "I asked you a question. What happened in English?" I said, "Well, isn't 5 A's good enough, Mom?" She said, "It depends on how you answer the question. Did you try your best in English?" And I thought for a moment, and I reflected. And I said, "No, ma'am, I can do better." She says, "Thank you. That's all." So trust me, dude, I was hearing a lot of the same things in the Holmes household.
Yeah.
A lot of the same things.
And you know what? It's great to have parents who do that. And I know not everybody does. So I'm open to that too. But at some point, you got to hold yourself accountable, right? I mean, even if your home life is not great, but if you want to change that, you have the ability to change. Doesn't mean you're going to be ultra rich. Doesn't mean a lot of other things, but you at least can improve upon where you were and where you are. And that's important. And you know what? Whether mom and dad are at home, because I know a lot of people who had, and you and I both know a lot of people at Central who didn't have a great home life. They didn't have a good mom like you're talking about, or I'm lucky enough to have had a wonderful mother or father. But at some point you got to take that next step and make the decision. Where do I want to be? That's why I encourage. I work a little bit with some of the University of Minnesota kids that are on the business side of things, and I'm fine just talking to any of them. I don't care. They could be pre-med, they could be this, they could be that, but they tend to want me to be the business guy. So I talk to some of these guys, but I tell them all the time. I said, look, this is your world. You have a scholarship to the University of Minnesota. It's a great institution, and if you just want to get by because you think you're going to play in the NFL, let me tell you, the NFL is a very difficult place to be. Even great players struggle. And a lot of people don't ever even get the opportunity, and you just don't know if that opportunity will be there. But you know what? You got somebody paying for your school. Why wouldn't you take advantage of that? I mean, let's think that over just for a little while, And And if you're lucky enough to be in that position, take advantage of it. I've told every kid that's ever come up to me at banquets or whatever at the University of Minnesota, how do I get to where you are? I said, don't worry about where I am. Just worry about what you need to do to be a lot better at what you're doing. And it's not a big secret. It takes time. James, not to tire you and bore you with this one, but I remember we played Michigan State at Michigan State, East Lansing. We flew back. Now, it was about a noon game, but it's on the East Coast or whatever, or not East Coast, but at Eastern time. We fly back. We get back. It's probably 6 o'clock at night by the time we get back to Minnesota. Everybody's talking about what they're going to do, this, that, and the other. And I went to the library, and all these guys are looking at me going, hey, where's Pete at? He's not at the party or whatever. I showed up about midnight, but I needed to get some stuff done. And I was not going to do it after the party, that's for sure. So I went to the library, and it was me and all kinds of other characters there, but not a whole lot of athletes were in there. But I'm at the library because I knew I needed to prepare for a test I had on Monday. And that was not unusual. And it was one of those things, I don't pat myself on the back, but it's just an example of, you got to take advantage of the situation and the time that you have. And time is critical when you're a college student, especially playing sports as well. You got to get it done. You got to take care of business and be very efficient with your time. Doesn't mean you can't have fun, because believe me, I went to the party at midnight and had a little bit of fun. But I at least got ready for Monday from that 6 to about 11 o'clock time frame too.
The key is you have the balance and you have the priorities.
Yeah.
You have your priorities in order, and that always matters. I think so often people just complicate things. Yeah. And, Coach Robinson used to say, gentlemen, it's still blocking and tackling.
It's true.
That's the same thing in life. Would you agree, Pete?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It is funny how we all have those memories too. There's always, we remember certain things. I remember almost every line Coach Holtz used to have for us too, and that was great. Jerry Burns at the Minnesota Vikings, underrated, great guy too, who he just would walk around at practice and kind of kick the grass and kind of come walking over, and he'd look over at me, and he talked like Burgess Meredith from Rocky. And he'd walk over there and look at me, and he'd just have strange conversations that were fun, but then he'd challenge you on something, and that's what it's about. We always want to challenge ourselves a little bit, try to be a little bit better, maybe a little bit smarter, maybe, whatever it might be, but those challenges are worth taking. And I appreciate all those folks that have been in my life that have influenced me that way.
Absolutely. So Pete, what is a general path? I know you get tired of answering this, but a lot of people don't know. Just a general path to, being an options trader, for example.
It's a difficult path. It's more difficult now than it was when I was there, and I'm first to admit it. And the reason I say that is this. When I went into the business world and options, there was still a trading floor that existed, and we would jump up and down and yell and scream, like I was saying, like in trading places. That no longer really exists. Now, there are still trading floors on the Chicago Board Options Exchange, New York Stock Exchange, places like that, Chicago Board of Trade. It's not the same. A lot of that trade is still, the majority, a huge majority, is still done now by computer. And so I would say that the world that I live in the options world, is a great world. I think it is by far the fastest growing part of the financial world that we all hear about or listen to or watch on a daily basis, whether it's at Fox Business or CNBC or wherever. It's the education level of it is the most important part. And that's something we've always tried to work hard with people, is to educate them, because it is complicated. And I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. It can be very complicated. When the light goes off, it's no longer complicated. I mean, all of a sudden that light switches from off to on, and all of a sudden you go, that's what it is. I get it now. but it takes some time. It takes a lot of work. There are ways to educate yourself in books. You know, there are mentors out there. We have coaches at our company that coach people. And I always tell everybody, look, educate yourself before you jump into this thing. This is a deep water pool that we're talking about here. And it's complicated, but once you get it, all of a sudden you realize, you know, there's a lot of benefits to this whole thing. It allows you to be able to use leverage. It costs less money to do certain things, but that comes with a little bit of a caveat of, well, but you also have a time frame. Options trade, sometimes they could last a week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months. They can go out multiple years. But then you have to understand which one makes the most sense. Well, it's always a different situation with every single stock, so it's not an easy answer. But there are a lot of different ways that people can educate themselves. And I would really encourage people to just look into it. You can find stuff online for free. There are great books out there. There are so many different ways that people could educate themselves. And that's the key, because the worst thing that can happen, I say this all the time, worst thing that can happen to somebody is they have success on an option trade, but they don't know why. They make money, but they don't understand. Oh, God, I made $1,000, you know? And that's almost the worst thing that can happen, because now they think they know something and they don't know anything. And the reality, then all of a sudden they start to lose, and it's not so fun. It's not so rewarding. So you just need to be educated so you understand it better on why did this not work? Why did this work? And what are all the different risks that are involved there? Because there are risks. I understand it, and everybody else will understand it much better once they start to look into it. But it allows people with less money to still be involved in a market, whether the market is a very bullish market going up, like we've been lately, or even in a market that's going down. That's the beautiful thing, like you brought up, James, very importantly, which is there are ways to hedge things. There are also ways to play options that you think are in a stock where it may be going lower, or it could be going higher. And you can play the move to the upside or the move to the downside. But you have to be educated and have to understand some of the historical knowledge of different companies, because if you don't, you will find yourself in a very uncomfortable spot. And you need to be educated enough to understand how to navigate the waters of the option world.
So what you say, generally, at least a master's degree, and then after that, start with the specialized education more toward options and derivatives, or would you say a master's and above and then start to specialize? I mean, what would you say?
I would honestly tell you this. Some of the greatest traders that I've met on the trading floor when that still existed, and that was just a different world, and here we are in this world with everything on a computer. But some of the greatest traders I know never went to college, never got a master's, never got anything. Matter of fact, one guy, I won't say his name, but he's a Minnesota guy who basically got to Chicago in about 1980 and traded on the trading floors there. He's actually lives out in Minnetonka now, one of the biggest houses on the entire lake. And he never went to college. Went to high school right in I can't say. If he tells me I can, I'll let you know. But he's a wonderful guy who he created he made enough money to own his own business, had multiple traders underneath him, and then all of a sudden it became 50 to 100 traders underneath him. And then he sold that business to Goldman Sachs for about $300 million. And then he started another one, sold that one for about $500 million. Then he started a hedge fund out here in Minnetonka. And this is a guy who never went to college. So I'm not saying that it's stupid to go to college. That's not my intent. But I think what I'd like to convey to people would be the level of education when it comes to the market. It really is not as big of a necessity as it is to understand, how do you look at a stock? You look at you start with all the fundamentals of the stock. What are the catalysts that might make a stock move up or down? Knowing the nuts and bolts, and like you said, and I think the perfect thing to say. Trade what you know. Understand what you know. And that's where you start. It's not the end be all end all, but it is where you start. You look, and every time you go to Target, it's packed. You go to Raising, if it's publicly traded, Raising Cane's, you see the line out the door, right? You've got the cars around the street, whatever the case may be. There are things that you can see there, but you still got to do the homework. After you come back, you still got to do the homework and look at the company and where it's trading and what the possibilities are for the future and all the rest of that. And that's something we can all do, regardless of education level, quite honestly, as long as you do the homework. You never can get past that discipline side of you got to do the work. No one's going to hand it to you. You're not just going to get out there and people are going to say, oh, yeah, come on over here. If they do, they're probably cheating you.
So, Peter, I think that a lot of times people assume that when they see someone like you that's like just really just killing it, it's like, oh, everything must have been easy. He never had any obstacles. He never had any tragedies to deal with or anything like that. And the people that know you know that that's not true. And you don't have to speak much on this, but I know like a couple of your brothers you lost, at a fairly early age. And you had to deal with all of that and still figure out a way to put it in a compartment and still, move on. Did you want to speak on that at all?
Oh, sure. That's the interesting part of it. I don't care what your financial situation is. Everybody's got something, and everybody's going to have something. And there's going to be pushback. There's going to be stumbling blocks. There's going to be all kinds of things in your way. I lost both my parents in the last year and a half. I lost my brother Paul to ALS in about 6.5 years ago, maybe 7. But it's and those are awful things, and but that's part of life. We all know that our parents, if we live long enough, our parents can't possibly outlive us. It's just those are difficulties. Those are hurdles we have to get past. There are a lot of other hurdles. I mean, being a parent's not easy. We all love our children, but there are times where that can be a monstrous disruption. There's always stumbling. I've had situations. I had a trading day well, back in the day when I stood on the trading floor where and it wasn't for a lack of understanding or anything else, but I was put in a very bad position where I lost a really significant amount of money in a single day, more than I had ever made in my entire life up to that point in one day. So actually, probably 1 hour. But you learn and you figure things out, and you there's a bounce back mechanism that we all have, and hopefully we all have, and hopefully we tap on that. But yeah, if people think every single day is roses and sunshine, they're wrong. I do always have a smile. I always do have a laugh, because you know what? I always try to look at something a little bit differently than everybody else is, and it's not always easy. There are tough times, like losing my brother Paul was tough. He was the greatest guy in the world. People just have no idea, but you got to keep pushing, and it's not easy.
Absolutely. So generally speaking, I'm not asking you to give away any trade secrets or anything like that,
No
but just from a macro view, where do you see things going in the next 5 to 10 years overall? Like I said, I'm not asking you to give up any trade secrets, but just like a macro forecast.
Yeah, well, I think that the world's gotten a little bit more volatile, I think, and we all see it. We see what's going on most recently, Afghanistan, but it's not just that. I mean, it's all over the world. There's issues here and there about China, and what's China going to do with Taiwan? I mean, in a big global picture, because sometimes you do have to stand back and look at the big global picture. And sometimes people, I know there's a younger generation out there that for whatever reason, they are not as interested in the news as you and I might be. They just aren't, and my kids included. They gather their news in social media, which I'm not sure that's always the greatest way to gather your news.
Oh my goodness!
But that is the world that we're sort of evolving into. And so I don't know that everybody is fully aware oftentimes of all these different things that are going on in the world. We can talk about from, global warming to this, that, the other. I mean, it's a myriad of different things going on out there. That being said, Warren Buffett's always talked about the markets generally from day one when he started in the markets. Generally, you're going in a direction that's going higher. And I don't disagree. And why would I push back on a guy who's one of the most successful, if not the most successful trader ever? So, I keep that in the back of my mind. When you look at all of these, the way the markets are shifting, the shift is certainly getting interesting into the directions that we are going. And it's, every market in a probably 5-year, 10-year sort of time frame is just a little different than it was before. Sometimes it's technology based, and everybody, I don't know if you recall back to 2000, but everybody was worried about, Y2K. What's going to happen in the year 2000?
Oh yeah, we all remember it very well.
The world's going to come to an end, right? I mean, the digital clocks aren't going to be able to figure it out, and all this other stuff. Well, somehow we managed through all that, and the technology, craziness that was going on, similar to what we have seen lately in other parts of technology as well. It's just always evolving, always something. But I think for the longer run, and I view 5 and 10 years as a longer run, I'm very bullish. But along the way, wouldn't be surprised to see some serious pitfalls, and they always come when you don't expect them. And a great example is this crazy pandemic we were in. You go back a year ago, March, and we watched the stock market absolutely go into a cratering downward slide. I don't think if somebody says they saw that bounce in the stock market from that low to where we are now, I wouldn't trust that person.
I didn't necessarily see the bounce, but I was buying because I've been studying old heads like Buffett for a long time, since the early 90s, and I know he was buying. So, I'm not sitting here claiming, oh, yeah, I'm Nostradamus. Right. I wasn't doing it aggressively. But I was definitely a buyer.
And I was too. But we were buying. The smart part about Warren's big expression, he's always said, but when there's blood in the streets, that's when you buy, right? And when there's too much euphoria, that's when you sell.
Absolutely.
We feel a little bit euphoric now after this big run, maybe from those lows of March of 2020. So I wouldn't be shocked to see a reasonably significant pullback. Not anything major, but a 5%, maybe 10%, which, if given the run that we've had in the market, is not that big of a pullback. But I wouldn't.
Well, but that would be healthy. That would be healthy.
Yeah, it probably would be healthy, and it would probably trigger for you and I to start looking around at what we want to buy now. Kind of a thing. So, on that pullback. But I think that the part that I think that I hear some guys on television talking about this. Oh, they caught it. Well, you and I caught it too, but we didn't expect it to go as fast as it did to the upside either. That's the part where I call the clowns on TV.
Yeah. No, you're correct there. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm a dollar cost average guy anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yep. Which is the smart way to do it. You don't need to go jump all in and then you have no other choices after that. So yeah, I would say that the path would be higher. Generally, if I'm looking at a 5 or 10 year, I'd say the general path would be higher. We just get companies that just are so smart, and they've got such a great vision of the future that they're looking at now. And I'll give you a great example of that. How many people thought Facebook was going to go down because of the fact that Mark Zuckerberg was under so much pressure, and Facebook itself? And the funny thing is, people were leaving Facebook. You know where they were going? Instagram. You know who owns Instagram? Facebook. I laughed almost every single day. I'd laugh on TV. I'm like,
oh man, that's a good one.
I mean, these people, I just sit there shaking my head going, you don't really know what you're talking about.
That's a good one.
But you know, that's
Did you
just,
see that coming at all? I must confess.
and that's just one example, though. That's one example of people not knowing enough about a company to know what they are, who they are, and all the rest of it, you know. And so it's why you have to do your work. You have to, you know, like you do, like I try to do each and every day. You do your work, you do your homework, you do your research, you do your boots on the ground. You're looking at, you know, what are all the catalysts that are out there that are potential the other thing that Mark Zuckerberg has done an amazing job, and I'm not here to pump Facebook by any means, but it's a company that, under all the pressure that they have had when he's up in front of whatever committee in Washington, D.C. he's in front of, which seems like once a month, but there are so many pieces of that company and people just don't know it. It's not just Instagram. Then you've got Messenger. Then you've got WhatsApp. Then you've got Marketplace. You've got all these, we call them verticals, of ways to make money. And that's not the only company that does that. The same thing could be said about Amazon. The same thing could be said about Microsoft. The same thing could be said about a lot of companies. But the really great companies have all kinds of ways to make money. And Apple's a great example. It used to be just about the phone. Then they got into something, and you know, the wearables are the latest. The services were the next one, but the wearables, they'll have something else next. They already do healthcare, the health world that they are shifted into. So, you know, these companies that do that are amazing. And I think that over time, as you said, a 5 or 10 year period, we'll see more and more of that in those companies, but other new companies that are competing with them as well. So I think the market's going higher.
Yeah, I agree with you, but you're the expert. But I feel good knowing that, knowing that our thinking is somewhat similar. I mean, I've just through the years just kind of learned to do my own research and form my own opinions, and then go that way. But it's like gravy when I get Pete Najarian kind of thinking along the way that I'm thinking, man, you just made my day, man. You made my day. I do teach, you know, a lot of financial literacy. I think you probably know that. And we start with the very basic stuff, and then we get, you know, we get into you know, plan as far as you know, options and so forth. Nowhere near your level, but at least so that they can have general understanding and education and so forth. But even when I start with the young tykes, I don't know if you're aware of my children's book series that I just completed not too long ago, Baby King Jamar. And it's one of the books is on investing. And literally we talk about these same things. If you get a chance, get the book, tell people about it, please. I appreciate it. I like your opinion on it. But as a kid, you know, we're talking about diversification. And what is it? Not putting all your eggs in the same basket. That's across the lines.
Yeah.
Just multi-layered. That doesn't change. You know, we talk about dollar cost averaging in there. We talk about opportunity cost. And we're talking to kids about this. And then those same things, they continue on.
Yep.
You know, even to the highest level. Wouldn't you agree?
I would totally agree. I think it's great and it's important. I love that you're doing that. I love that you're trying to get people more financially literate. I work with the NFL with that as well. I've spoken to teams. I've spoken to individual groups on teams about that, because nothing breaks my heart more than a guy who makes $100 million who's broke. You know, and there are a lot of guys
times
like
they don't know, Pete.
Yeah.
That's all they know. No one ever showed them.
Yeah. And it's sad because, you know, let's be honest, that kind of money is ridiculously high amount of money to have been lost for all the wrong reasons without the proper help. So I've committed to always trying to help out guys and just sort of give them the point blank, hey, here's how it all works. And if you can think this through and make better decisions about it, you'll have money for the rest of your life. You know, I mean, the rest of your life, and you'll live like a king. Yeah, but you'll live a smarter king's life. You know.
Bam.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
exactly. You can still have all the things you want, but let's just have a plan.
Yeah.
For it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always felt bad about the guys, and I'll give you a quick, brief summary of part of what I say when I've talked to some of the players in the NFL. I will look at them and say, okay, you just signed a contract for how much money? $60 million. Okay. You're the running back for the Minnesota Vikings. That's great. How much money do you think you'll make? $60 million. No, you didn't. The government's going to take 50. So you already got $30 million. So you've already lost half. So now, are you going to be married? Yes. What do you think the chances are of that being successful? Because that might come with the cost. That's another half. And children, I mean, there's so many different aspects before we even get into the clothes, the house for mom that mom does deserve, but you got to understand, mom can't probably afford the taxes and a lot of the other. So you're going to have to do that. You have to think through all of these things, and you're going to have that big, beautiful truck that you like, but you're also going to have a big, beautiful car that you like. I said, before you know it, that's 60 million. Now you haven't even stepped on the field yet, and you're down to about 7. So, there's a lot of ways to kind of cut through it. And I laugh a little bit, but it just like you, I mean, but it's true. I mean, it's all these things. I mean, the taxes and the difficulties with marriage can be very difficult, and we all know that. But also, with children and with this and with that and buying these houses and all these things that you want, it's great. But you just got to step back for a moment and really look at it, and then start to say, well, my 60 is really 30. If you can already start there, you're halfway home to figuring out that things go quick. And they really do. And it's in the NBA, the Major League Baseball, football. I mean, as big as these contracts are, look at Adrian Peterson. And I love Adrian Peterson, but look at 100 million plus he's made in his career, and he's 10 million in the hole. I mean, that's just sad. And I feel for him, but he's just gotten bad advice, obviously, to how he should be using his money in a much more wise way.
You are so correct. And the NFL is very fortunate to have you working with them in that capacity, because we've both been around money people before. And I'll tell you what, to me, irregardless of someone's net worth, their character still matters, whether someone doesn't have very much and they have good character, or whether they have a lot and have good character or bad character. And actually, I think when you have a lot, it's more challenging to maintain your good character. And there are a lot of guys like you, well, in your position, socioeconomically, and they'll go there and they're still just, taking advantage of the ill-informed, and the fact that you do what you do with the degree of integrity that you do and the degree of character that you do, I think is just absolutely cool. I'm not surprised. I know how you were raised, and that stuff carries on. And to all the young people out there, I mean, to me, that's the same message, and I know you agree, is your character is what you do when no one's watching, right. And we talk about investments and things like that and money and so forth, but it's really not about money. If you're doing what you're supposed to do, the money and things like that will take care of themselves. Would you agree with that, Peter?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you bring up a really good point that I always bring up to my kids growing up, which is about the character side. It's what you're doing when the camera's not on you, when nobody's watching. And are you doing the right thing, or what is your character? Who are you? And I'm very proud of both my children for what they are doing and the people that they have become, the good people that they become, because they understand a lot. They've heard all the stories about Central High and all the things that, that I had in my early part of my life that they didn't have, but they've learned through me. And they used to look forward to the trips to Minneapolis, because I'd drive them by Central and Bryant and all the city area, just letting them know this is where Dad went. You need to know this. This is the history of, of your family. And it's exciting and it's fun. And it is what built character. And, it's a funny thing. During the pandemic, one of the things that I was doing every single morning, I'd go over to the local high school here in Minnesota, and I'd go over there and run in the morning. And, Didn't have to worry about masks, didn't have to worry about social, nobody's there. It's still dark. And I don't need anybody there. I don't need anybody to check off the box except for me. And so, that's hopefully the character that I try to be, which is a guy who I'm hopefully the same person all the time. I hope that's my goal.
Something else I want to just mention is that Pete does a lot of speaking, and he can garner huge fees for speaking. I mean, because who wouldn't want to listen to what Pete Najarian has to say? And just the fact that he's sharing this with us for free, no money, nothing like that. As a matter of fact, when I approached him about it, he was like, "Sure, let's do it." And I was like, "Well, okay, I'll try not to take up much of your time, Pete." And his response was, "Well, take as much time as you need." I mean, that speaks volumes for your character. We're very appreciative. Thank you so much, brother. And I call you brother because we're still brothers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And love you, man.
Love you.
And I hope that you keep killing it the way that you're killing it. And I just thanks a lot, Pete, for joining us.
No, I appreciate it. You guys are great. It's great to meet Martin as well. Wonderful guy. And I'll tell you, congrats on the books. And I love that you're doing all that. And I will be reading.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, man.
Have a great week.
You too.